off top. So, is it possible that Mike McDaniel only had one really good idea? So, the coach of the Miami Dolphins, we all thought of as an offensive guru because he was able to solve the unsolvable problem. What do you do if you have a fragile quarterback, a porous offensive line, but two really fast receivers? You develop an offense that is largely based on anticipation and accuracy, the two things that your quarterback had that he was really, really good at. Oh, I forgot the fact that he doesn't have a super strong arm. But what happens when you lose that quarterback? How do you address it? How do you solve the problems? We answer that question next. Play the music.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.
All right, so welcome to the Domonique Foxworth Show. I'm joined remotely by my buddy, Charlie the Vanilla Snack Kravitz. How are you, Charlie?
Miss you.
Miss you more. So this idea was proposed to me by you. That's what prompted my film study, because you wanted to figure out, which I guess is a fair question. You could explain further why you wanted to dive into this, but it came down to, I guess, I'm assuming everyone said Tua is not the system and this system can work despite Tua, and now we don't have Tua and the system's not working?
Yeah, there's a lot that I wanted to look into and hear about the X's and O's of McDaniel's offense, because people were calling him the next Sean McVay last year. They're talking about how fast the ball got out of Tua's hands, the route tree, how they had everyone in motion. And coming into this season, I'm not sure if it's a McDaniel issue, a Chris Greer issue, but they came into the season with a very fragile quarterback who's had multiple concussions, multiple ankle surgeries, a hip surgery, and maybe the worst backup room in the entire NFL with Skylar Thompson and now Snoop Huntley at the helm. And I think we all assumed that Tua was a superstar system quarterback, but their offense is so impotent without him that I wanted your input on why.
Yeah, so, I mean, we can do the X's and O's and dots. We have dots up here for people to check out. I'll do my best to explain it thoroughly. But, I guess we do that first, and then we can get into the conversation after that about roster construction and decision, because I think we disagree on how important or how they have constructed their roster. But here we go. Here's the first play. This is, and to be completely fair to this entire team, they weren't great when Tua was there. So it's possible that the offensive system itself might have needed some evolution that we're not getting. But here, this is their game against Jacksonville, the only full game that Tua played. And, sorry.
And just to be clear, the offense was so bad last night, which is what led to this 90 yards up until their final drive, which was in garbage time. And your whole point is that we're going to look at the scheme partially when Tua is around and when he's not. These dots are Tua in the game and where the scheme has not evolved since we were calling McDaniel.
I mean, I think you brought up Matt LaFleur as an example of a coach who developed an offense that kept cooking around a backup quarterback, which the backup quarterback is incredibly unique relative to the starter in that situation. Malik versus Jordan is a little different jump from, I guess, Tua to Skylar and Snoop. So I think what we saw there was a complete kind of rethinking of their system, which I think you have to do. That's what coaching is, frankly. It's in a small window, but generally you want to build a system around the players that you have. And if one of those players leaves, the real challenging part is how can you tweak the system around the skills that the quarterback has now in this situation. So anyway, we'll go back to the Jacksonville game. It was the only full game that Tua played this season, and there's some really impressive plays in here, despite the fact that they didn't dominate from start to finish like we came to expect this offense to do early in last year. So here's the first play. It's a cover 4, and it's a deep shot. Tua uses his eyes to draw the safety to Tyreek and throws the ball over his head because he draws up the opposite side safety. He pulls him up with his eyes and Tyreek, and then throws it over his head to Jalen Waddle, who's running wide open. And it's a big monster play, pivotal play in that game. We'll go from this to almost the exact same play that they're running this weekend against the Titans. This time it's cover 3, and again, the safety pulls up, and the shot is there. Snoop doesn't take it. He checks it down. And that's about anticipation because he's not wide open, but you can see that he's neck and neck. I'll pull it back just a little bit so you can see right here. the you see Tyreek has switched with Waddle. So Tyreek is running the go and Waddle is running the deep curl. So Huntley uses his eyes to draw the attention to Waddle, and then you'll see as I advance it a little bit, Tyreek has a step on him, and Huntley has to anticipate that and let it fly and give him a chance, and he chooses not to. He doesn't even go to Waddle, which in this case, I see Waddle is not completely wide open, but there's space to the side, and that speaks to like the relationship. There's space away. There's a play later on here that you'll see where Tua uses that space and throws the receiver into the space. So these are not things that I think you pick up until you don't have them anymore. So this is an example of Tyler not being comfortable with throwing an anticipation throw and trusting his eyes. And rather than that, he's afraid to make a mistake and checks it down. That's one missed opportunity at a big play. Here's another deep shot, and this is where he does the opposite. Again, you're reading, it would appear to me that this is cover 4, and you should be reading this front side safety, the safety that's over top of Tyreek, because the Waddle then comes from the left to the right and fills in that area. And rather than throw it to Waddle, who is coming into the vacated area, we watch the safety, 37, chase Tyreek deep in the corner. L'Jarius Sneed, 38, also squeeze on Tyreek. And Huntley doesn't feel like in this situation he feels comfortable in his offense, and he's reading and anticipating where he should throw the ball. He just gives it a shot, throws it up to Tua, that ends up being incomplete. It's first down, so you take a shot, it's fine.
So just to be clear, they're running the Tua playbook.
Yeah.
The offense that was incredibly electric, the greatest show on surf, with Tyler Huntley, who can't make the plays and doesn't have the chemistry that Tua had with his receivers.
That's what it looks like to me. These are the exact same plays, and I get you want to take advantage of the speed that you have, but you have to have a quarterback that feels comfortable throwing into these spots. So, all right, now this is about the anticipation that I was talking about. Anticipation, trust, and accuracy. Watch when he lets go of this ball. This is two-man. He lets go of this ball. Right now, he's not open when he lets go of the ball. He throws it into space. He leads his man into the open space and makes a play. Watch when he lets it go. It's before he's covered. And this is Tua taking advantage of his relationship with the players taking advantage of his relationship with the receivers and taking a shot in this spot. This one is the most impressive one. I'm not sure if it shows up on dots as well as it shows up in live action, but this play is absolutely covered. They're running a corner route into a safety in a corner over there with Tyreek Hill. And rather than throwing him into that spot or eating the sack or checking it down, Tua throws it behind him into an open zone rather than throwing to a receiver. So there are 4 defenders around Tyreek Hill. There's really nowhere for him to go. They're not super tight, but they're everywhere where he should go. And Tyreek Hill sits it down because he anticipates and reads this coverage. And Tua also recognizes the situation from playing together and throws it right there. This is a big game in the Jacksonville game. Turns out to be another pivotal play, and it's not a play that I think Snoop Huntley is comfortable with making. Now, this is...
So does this scheme totally rely on anticipation? Is that a part of McDaniel's scheme?
It feels like the biggest part of this particular version of McDaniel's scheme is anticipation and trust. And you're not going to be able to build trust with the quarterback that you brought in 2 weeks ago. And it doesn't appear to me that Tyler Huntley's skill set matches Tua's, because Tua's anticipation is what he does. He was good at that at college. Like, that's the thing that he does special. So I assumed that when Mike McDaniel was developing whatever system he wanted to develop around Tua, he looked at what does he do well? We're going to major in that. And one thing he does well is trust and anticipate. And now he's trying to run this same scheme with players who aren't incredibly anticipatory and don't necessarily have the relationship or the trust with the receivers. This last one is just an inaccurate throw. We got to step on him. And when you have plays that actually work, you need quarterbacks to hit. Tyreek has a step on L'Jarius Sneed, and it's a terribly underthrown ball, which is also a recurring theme. These deep shots are Snoop Huntley is not a great deep ball thrower, or at least he hasn't been so far in this system. So you have to figure out new weapons, and they've done a bunch of screens and stuff with Tua before, and they did a bunch of screens with Tyler Huntley. But this offense doesn't work if they aren't going to run the ball well and hit the big shots over the top. And you have to trust and be accurate to let those things fly.
Is that abnormal to you that there's not been evolution in this offense? for what we thought was going to be this revolution for the first 5 games of last year.
Yeah, I want to be fair. I think part of the problem is that they have a new quarterback, so it's hard to change the entire offense with a guy that just got there 2 weeks ago. But the offense also didn't evolve prior to the new quarterback. Like, they were still doing the same general concepts. Like, they would do them out of different looks, but they would get to the same general concepts previous to the Tua injury. And they did not blow the doors off the Jaguars, and they were getting their doors blown off by the Bills before Tua got hurt. So the evolution of the offense has not happened. There's a one good idea, and then you have to build on it. And they haven't built on it. And it's tough when you have the comparison of what's happening in Minnesota and what's happening in Green Bay at the same time, where these are places where there are new quarterbacks who we had no expectations for, having a lot of success. And then when you watch the tape, you can see how the coaches are scheming up these opportunities for them. You can see, particularly in the Green Bay situation, where they implemented pretty novel run concepts based on what they've done in the past, because they have a quarterback who's capable of doing it. And the reason why I don't think I mean, I recognize that it's not easy, but the reason why I don't think it's that hard is the blocking schemes don't change that much. What changes is the position of the running backs and maybe how many fake handoffs there are. Like, putting those sorts of plays in and then building play action off of that would seem to me to be the next proper step if you have a backup quarterback replacing your anticipation thrower.
Are you ready to be interrogated?
Can't wait.
Is it really about anticipation, or is it about Tyler Huntley not being able to make the throws? Because in the Titans game, which I cannot stress enough, was an offensive abomination by this offensive genius. He had Tyreek Hill on 2 70-plus yard touchdowns and just could not make the throw.
Yeah, I think that those both are fair. So if you want a answer to the dots, it's about plays that are designed to benefit off of your anticipation. That's one thing that I saw, and it's a much shorter and more boring conversation. He can make some throws, run the plays that he can make. So you could say that he can't make the throws, but you can also say that they're running plays that are designed for someone else to make throws that he can't make. And Tua's not the biggest arm quarterback out there. Tyler Huntley has the arm strength to make these throws if he can anticipate the way that Tua does. But he doesn't. So why are we doing this? And I showed that last play for a specific reason, because that's to your point. Yeah, those are just bad throws. Sometimes he reads it right and he just throws a bad throw. But if you're going to do that, then you got to scheme up some easy throws for him.
And that's what I'm wondering, because if he can't make those specific throws, then that seems clear that you can't run that same specific offense. You need to evolve it. And we saw Tyler Huntley have a brief period of being somewhat successful in Baltimore, and he was just peppering Mark Andrews with targets in the middle of the field with intermediary throws, which is not something that the Dolphins have been traditionally doing. But I brought up LaFleur and the Malik Willis example to you for a specific reason. They played the Titans, who boat raced the Dolphins on Monday Night Football, and LaFleur rebuilt his entire offense on the fly around someone with a completely different and more limited skill set. And we've seen that with, coaches in the past going from guy to guy and being like, okay, how can we stay competent while our guy is out? Is it not incredibly concerning that McDaniel does not seem to be comfortable making those changes? Because, okay, if LaFleur's from the same coaching tree as McDaniel is, he just installed a run first system with his quarterback. You have Devon Achane, you have Jalen Waddle, you have Tyreek Hill. You're sort of all in with speed all around these guys and elite playmakers. And it's just bizarre that you can't get the running game going at all or generate any sort of intermediary passing game without Tua. Because there's a larger conversation even about exactly how good Tua is, which we'll get to, because his stock's never been higher than it is now.
Yeah, I think there are a couple different stages and a couple different times, I think, where you're challenged, or more than a couple. This feels like, so he answered the first challenge so well that we assumed that he was some sort of savant, because we thought that problem was so unsolvable. And we saw what happened with a quarterback that we thought wasn't good enough, an offensive line that we knew wasn't good enough. He made one of the most explosive offenses we'd ever seen. So obviously, we're going to say, wow, this guy is great. But it felt like it's possible, given what situation we're in now, that he was the perfect person for that one problem. And now we're waiting for him to figure out how to address this next problem. And he hasn't yet, which doesn't mean that he can't, but he hasn't. And I think what's more concerning to me about him as a coach and this team going forward is he's not trying to do different things, and he's not trying to evolve this offense to fit the talent that he has. And that is the most impressive thing I think about Kyle Shanahan, who is always the guy we point to get the best out of players who may not be that talented. But he's as much as we want to think of his system as one way, he's always kind of found new ways to adjust and add to his system based on the players that he has, like Debo in the backfield. That's relatively new. It's not something that he was doing a bunch of in the past. And splitting Kittle out was something he did before. And all the short passing games to Christian McCaffrey. He's built on the players that he has, and you're not seeing that same type of innovation out of Mike McDaniel anymore.
No, we literally have, like, Tyreek Hill is that meme of the Lamborghini that's like on the side open garage of that beatdown house. I mean, look, Kevin O'Connell lost McCarthy. Sam Darnold's 4-0. He's an MVP candidate. Matt LaFleur lost Jordan Love. The Packers went 2-0 with Malik Willis. Shane Steichen lost Anthony Richardson. That might be an upgrade when they went to Joe Flacco, and they won without him. Mike McDaniel is 1-6 without Tua. That's from Matt Canada. Not Matt Canada, but someone named Matt on Twitter. Different Matt Canada. So I mean, it's interesting, and like part of me wonders, and this is the roster construction point, is did the GM just sort of, for lack of a better term, McDaniel over with not having a backup quarterback? Like, you have a quarterback who's had 5 concussions and multiple surgeries, who's finished since he was a freshman in college. We've seen him finish one season, and it was last year, the year he needed to get paid. We know he has sort of it can have a fragile mentality with coaches. Like, I don't understand how, of all the teams, you aren't having the highest price backup in the NFL. Like, Skylar Thompson was leaps and bounds better than Snoop Huntley, who they brought in. And Skylar Thompson, when I was watching him play football, it was like, whoa, this is not someone who can be playing in an NFL offense. And I know you pay for Jalen Waddle, you pay for Tyreek Hill, but that means you're all in. And if you're all in, you need to have a plan to, like, succeed with those guys, because if you're a rational general manager, you can't expect Tua to be your quarterback for 17 games.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I think that there's also, I haven't looked into the intricacies of their cap, but they are all in on a quarterback and all in on 2 big money receivers. It's not an endless ability to sign guys. Like, a good backup quarterback is what, $10 million? Like, I assume that the plan was we go, like, it's a high risk plan. I'm not saying that it's the right plan, but the plan is we're not winning the Super Bowl without Tua. There's not a backup out there that we could win the Super Bowl with. I guess you would argue that maybe we have a backup that could keep the boat afloat if Tua has to leave for 4 weeks or so, which is what it seems like it's about to be for him right now. And yeah, when it happens, you look silly. But if Tua stays healthy all season like he did last year, then you have a better chance of winning because you've used those assets to bolster the rest of the team. And it does seem like pretty shoddy roster construction. I don't blame you, but it feels unfair to be critical of last year's decision to not get a top-level backup. It seems like there's a lot of decisions that were made up until this point that seemed logical at the time, but you're paying for right now.
I just think it's like, as of 2 years ago, it's crazy to not have a top level backup for him. And I mean, I don't know, Taylor Heineke, Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
Like, you're winning games with those guys if McDaniel is, like, who we think he is.
I guess I'm prone to give Chris Greer a little more credit that this was not oversight, because it's so obvious.
I don't think it was an oversight either.
That it was a conscious decision. Maybe you disagree with the strategy behind the decision.
I do.
But so that's a different conversation than it seems like it's just saying he's stupid. and he just messed up. I think you could also throw in there, now this might be a reach, but Tua is a quarterback who's familiar with having Ryan Fitzpatrick take his job. And Tua is someone who you said yourself is
Ding, ding, ding.
psychologically impacted by the way that coaches behave around and towards him. Like, I think it's right now it looks dumb, but if any part of you, and I guess if you pay Tua, that's
exactly what I was going to ask. Is once you got the $250 million, then it's like, you, I'm the guy.
Yeah. If any part of you is like, man, if we bring in a Joe Flacco, is that going to make Tua uncomfortable and revert? And you're like, but we already paid him, so that should make him feel confident and calm. But we already paid him, so anything that could cause him to go into some sort of psychological hole could be a risk. And this is, I mean, it's a ridiculous conversation to have. I think it's the strategy that they chose, and it's failed, which is fine. It stinks.
Jameis Winston, $4 million for this year. Tyrod Taylor, 2 years, $11 million.
Okay, Tyrod, yeah. Jameis would be fun in this. Jameis got an arm.
I was about to say, Tyreek's down there somewhere. It's about to be back if they got Jameis.
That would be fun with Jameis, but you know who it would not be fun for is Tua. Tua's right now getting confidence. He's going to come back on fire because he knows that he's needed.
He's going to come back. Yeah, it's going to be a great 3 weeks until we then you're doing get up segments about whether or not Tua should retire again.
I'm skittish about.
I'm not even making a joke about it. It's just like, this is over and over again.
Oh no, that's not what I was skittish about. I watch football every weekend. I'm not skittish about head injuries. Like, we can all be up in arms and clutch our pearls, but then we all turn it back on again.
I was going to say shoulders, knees, and toes.
I was going to say that I'm skittish about. I think I'm skittish about criticizing Chris Greer, because when I said that they were tanking and it was morally reprehensible, they went on and won more games than they were supposed to. So I was wrong for on Chris Greer then. So now I am a little bit more hesitant about on Chris Greer's decision-making right now, even though it seems like an obvious mistake.
Yeah, I mean, it's that, and that's the thing, is like, we're talking about the process here too. It's like,
yeah.
Like they might get lucky and have a healthy Tua season. That's definitely possible.
Right.
You have a 1 in 7 chance based on what we've seen in the last 7 years.
Oh,
but the process sucks.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not saying Chris Greer is a bad general manager. He's made a lot of really good moves. Even like last year, we were lauding him for signing McDaniels, building this team around speed, drafting Achane, making the Tyreek Hill trade, and executing it day of and getting the contract extension done with him. So it's not like he's, I've seen plenty of bad GMs in Washington. I lived through the Bruce Allen era. I'm not saying that at all. It's just like in this case, it's just such a premium for a team that is all in. And I know the old Tom Moore thing. We don't practice, so we don't practice having a backup quarterback. But Tua is not Peyton Manning.
Yeah, absolutely not. I think there's one other thing. Since we're talking about the Tua thing,
I've cursed so much on this episode. I'm sorry, Brian.
Yeah, Tua. The conversation about him coming back is starting up, and I think this is we haven't really had a should Tua retire conversation on this show, because I think we felt like it was kind of a waste of time, but I do think that it's worth bringing up a couple points. So one of the things about the head injury stuff is the research is not at a point where we fully know whether the big concussions or the multiple subconcussive episodes are the problem, which is not advocating for Tua to come back. I think the main point of all this that I realize and I have to remind myself of is anybody who is up in arms about Tua coming back, like, I think it's more about us being concerned about him making us feel bad and him making us feel weird about watching this game than it is about, like, actually protecting Tua. I'm not saying that it's completely safe for him to come back, but the brain injuries the brains that have been studied of players who have played, many of them have played their entire careers without having these major explosive head injuries and still have some CTE. So, like, it's a dangerous game. And there was another point about Tua that Ryan Clark made last night that I thought was a good one that hadn't been in this conversation, is it gets easier to retire from the game when your body can no longer do what you wanted to do. And it's got to be incredibly hard for someone who's played football their entire life. Eventually the concussion symptoms subside and they feel great. Their body is fine. They can still run and throw the same way that they ever could. Their brain still feels the same way that it always did. It's got to be impossible or really hard for someone with their body feeling that way to say, you know what, this isn't for me anymore. So,
yeah.
All that said, I don't know. These were just topics that jumped into my head that we never really addressed on this show.
Well, and 2 points on that. It's been reported by Schefter, Tua is symptom-free and is on track to return in Week 8.
Yeah, and I think we need to get comfortable. All of us who are uncomfortable with him coming back, I'm not saying it's the right thing for him to do or not, but we need to get comfortable with him coming back, and that's what it's going to be.
And we'll move on after this. But we also just found out Brett Favre has Parkinson's, so there is
right. No, it's I don't even think that's a counterpoint. I think that's all fair to be there. I think, but I think that what you're calling a counterpoint has been the prevailing point in this conversation. And the other thing that I saw Jason Kelce bring up, which again, it's people justifying going back out there, but you are making a decision based on an unknown, right? So I assume the decision would be much easier if this was like hard and fast stuff. Like, all right, one more concussion changes your percentage of traumatic brain injury by this much. It's guaranteed to happen. Like, we don't have that information at research. We do know that it goes up. So I guess that's the position that most people are taking, is why put yourself back out there to send the traumatic brain injury rates back up even higher. But you're very right. It's his life. It's his body. It stinks. We can yell all we want, but we are not going to stop watching the NFL. So that's that.
Yeah. And, Brett Favre didn't care about his mental state's welfare. Hopefully Tua does. And do you like that one?
I love that one. I did love that one. It is, what else in the league do you want to talk about?
Can we talk about this a funnier story, the Davante Adams thing, where, and we'll go through some other stuff, but this is, you've talked about contract hamstringitis with T. Higgins, and now we're having Davante, who is not separating. He also has a bit of a hamstring injury. There's reports that the Raiders are considering trade offers for him. Antonio Pierce, who I got a tiny back story on the Antonio Pierce thing. Do you remember Max Crosby was saying he was going to demand a trade if they didn't hire Antonio Pierce this offseason from his interim thing? Well, now he's liking Instagram posts saying that Davante Adams has played his last game with the Raiders.
Antonio Pierce is liking those, not Max Crosby.
Yeah, Antonio Pierce is liking them. Sorry. But a crazy turn of events from like the most beloved locker room uniter to everything that's happening now in Oakland. And maybe he still is. And maybe Davante is just the outcast in this.
He was calling out people making business decisions last week. Was he talking about Davante? It was Davante. Yeah, I
assume he was part of it. Yeah. But if they're open to trading him, one, who do you think should push their chips in and get him? And also, what does this say about the state of a team when you can't sort of make things work with a superstar player who's definitely on the back nine of his prime, but you get someone like Davante Adams and you expect it to work better than this has?
I don't. So we can start with the team. So I don't love Antonio Pierce as a head coach, but I try to understand that there are different ways of leadership. Not everyone has to lead the same way. It seemed whatever Antonio Pierce was doing last year, it seemed like it was working. And
he played so hard.
Yeah, and I remember the calls to hire him where, like, I was like, I don't know, but okay. Like, I'm not going to stand up opposed to it. Like, this is working. But this year, where he's commenting on injured players on other teams, he's calling out his players. I mean, he was one of he was the only coach in football to say that he kind of hoped Tua retired. Like, what are you doing, man? Coach your own team. He is calling out business decisions afterwards and liking Instagram posts. Like, the liking Instagram post is really like a new coach thing that I had not seen before, and all that stuff. Like, it to me doesn't work, and it's hard to argue that this locker room or this team is headed in the right direction. That aside, nobody should trade for Davante Adams.
No one.
I mean, maybe somebody should, but the two teams that come to mind, I would say shouldn't do it.
You're talking about the Chiefs and the Bills?
I guess I threw the Jets in there. I was thinking Chiefs. I was thinking Chiefs and Jets. But I guess I would say no to the Chiefs and the Bills. The Jets is the only one that should be considered. I said no to the Chiefs because I think that I think the Chiefs' offensive problems are more than a weapons issue. And
Really?
yeah, I think their offensive. I mean, I think
The left tackle?
it's not just the left tackle; it's also the quarterback. Like and maybe it's a result of the left tackle, but the quarterback is not comfortable in the pocket and he's not playing well. I think that's and the one big play they had to where they had 7 people in protection, and it was a great throw. And I think Patrick Mahomes did magical Mahomes things in that game also, but he's very uncomfortable right now playing football, and it doesn't look great. I don't think anyone cares about that because we all believe that he's going to be fine. But
4-0, too.
yeah, but they're 4-0, but I mean,
Oh, no, I'm with you. I'm just saying part of why people don't care about it, where they're like,
yeah, but I mean, I
think
think people care about right now. I think one of the misunderstandings of the Chiefs is that the issue is the weapons. I think the protection is a bigger issue than the weapons. Honestly, the lack of weapons. I think getting Davante does not solve the protection problem. I think that's a bigger issue than the weapons problem. And whatever problem that Mahomes is having right now in the way that he's playing, I mean, I'm not concerned about that long term, but I don't think the answer is giving up assets that you're going to need to build around this team is a smart move. And I feel similar for different reasons, but similar about the Bills, and that the Bills are kind of in a rebuild mode. And I guess maybe if they feel like that, maybe I would have felt differently if they would have been at least competitive with the Ravens, or if they would have beat the Ravens. But Davante Adams is an all-in move, right?
Yeah.
That's going to cost you some serious capital, at least a first-round pick, I would guess, right? I'm assuming that's what they're going to get for it.
I was going to guess a second-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a risk worth taking, but those are players that play. Like these, for a team like the Bills, that seems like they are moving in a direction of rebuild. They need as many shots as they can so they can hit on some of these picks. And a team that moved away from a receiver that was kind of a malcontent, I guess, based on how they are talking about that team now that Stephon Diggs is gone, bring in another receiver who I guess you would assume would want to be there, so maybe it wouldn't be as big of an issue, but bring in another receiver who has those same things to get rid of, and getting rid of some draft capital seems like a move that I wouldn't expect the Bills to do, and they should. The only one that's worth considering is the Jets. Go ahead.
I was about to say, there are a couple more, but let's go to the Jets. They are all in.
Right.
I think that's completely fair to say. They have a 40-year-old quarterback who, we don't know how long he's going to be at his peak. He's already lost some physical skills, like with his lower body, but he still throws it great. Garrett Wilson, who we thought was going to be a true number one, and maybe is not. Maybe he's more of a complimentary good receiver, and he's sort of been supplanted by Alan Lazard as Rodgers' favorite target. Breece Hall, who we thought was going to be an electric running back, and is splitting time with Braylon Allen. They're in win now mode, and Davante Adams is like, he's Rodgers' guy.
Yeah, that's the only one that to me makes some level of sense. I think I would be hesitant to it because I don't think that this team is going to be as good as we want it to be. But I think it's probably a reasonable move for them because the way that they're running offense there is very early 2000s, I guess, mid 2000s. Whereas we've gotten to a place in modern football where there's a lot of scheme that is creating easy plays for quarterbacks. Even the good quarterbacks, there is some scheme that's creating easy plays for them, like Mahomes and Allen and Jackson. Part of their success is because they have quite a few plays where the scheme takes over for them. And Purdy, and then they have those special plays on top. The way that Aaron Rodgers is running this offense is not using much motions or shifts and not much scheme. It's like, I'm going to use my great arm and my connection with these receivers to find little holes to exploit a defense. And that works sometimes. But if you're asking a team to do that for the course of an entire game, it's going to backfire on you. And we saw how it looked in week 1 against a good defense in the 49ers, and we're seeing how it looked last weekend against the Broncos, who also have a good defense, where you're going to beat them with your arms sometimes. But if they know what you're trying to do, it's not much you can. And if your team doesn't even know what you're trying to do, it's pretty hard to get there. So I guess that's the argument, is you bring in another receiver who would likely be on the same page as him. But I just think it's kind of an antiquated way to go about playing football. And what made it work for Aaron Rodgers for so long, I think, was that little bit of athleticism that he's lost
athletic.
Now. But I mean,
wasn't like,
I guess it's the difference between how he was before and how he is now. That's what I mean. Not him being a little bit of an athlete. It's like the little bit of athleticism that he's lost because of the Achilles. I think that we're seeing, I would compare it somewhat to what Jaden Daniels is doing in Washington right now. Is I think Jaden Daniels is running a similar hyper-simplicated system, but when the things aren't there, he uses his athleticism to then put the defense in conflict. And Aaron Rodgers is incapable of doing that. So it's just all on his arm. He's got to arm his way through the whole game, and it's not working. I distracted you by saying Jaden, and now
you just buttered me up. You say he's the next Aaron Rodgers. This is great stuff. No, but okay. I don't want to pivot it too much from this, but Davante's 32. Whoever trades for him can get out of his contract after this year. Let's say it's a 4. You're giving him a 4th round pick to go. We got 12 games with Davante Adams, see if it works.
Yeah.
At that point, does that change the calculus of how many teams should be interested in this? Because I know we talked, but I also think Cowboys, Lions, Ravens, those are all teams that are.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, for a 4, I think everybody should give him a shot. You know, like for a 4th round draft pick, it's worth. I don't know what the numbers are on 4th round draft pick success rate, but I'll take a shot at moving on from a 4th round draft pick for a player that I think a defense is going to have to pay attention to. The problem is when you get up around the 1s and 2s, and maybe you're right, maybe a 1 is too high. I think a 1 is way too high, but I'm not sure a 1 is too high for a team that's desperate. A 2, I would be really concerned. Multiple picks, I'm out on that. So, it's worth it for a 4th round pick. Anyone is worth giving a shot for a 4th round pick.
Is pick 97 the line?
Yes, pick 97 is the line. Yeah, because that's right where you get. That's the cutoff for potential first-year starters. Pick number 97.
Okay, that's the exact line.
Yes, the fans of the Denver Broncos in 2005 will know Charlie is making fun of me.
Okay, let's move on from Davante. Last thing I want to ask you about. We're a quarter of the way through the football season. How nuts is that? Feels like it's flying by.
It does. I feel like flying by. Woo!
You think it's crawling? Give me 20 more weeks of this season. But we're at the point now where we're starting to find out some teams that are good and some teams that are bad that we thought might be good coming into the season. I have a list for you that I can go through.
Okay.
Of teams that after 4 games, I think can win the Super Bowl.
Goodness. Okay.
That are still and I think some teams are cross offs. Like there are some teams. First, I'll give you the list of teams that I thought before the season could win the Super Bowl, and I've crossed off.
All right. I like this game. Sorry, I got distracted because I started thinking about Ravens defensive dots. I think I want to do defensive dots on the Ravens, how they stopped Josh Allen. Anyway.
That was the other suggestion, yeah. I mean, I love that one.
Okay. I didn't read your text. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Here are the teams that I crossed off of that could be good before the season. The Jets. They're not winning the Super Bowl.
Nah.
The Bengals.
Nah.
The Cowboys.
Nah.
The Eagles.
Nah.
The Rams.
I mean, the Eagles, you said the Rams?
Yeah.
You thought the Rams before the season?
I thought they could be they're a dark horse team that could be really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like the Rams preseason. I like them less now that everyone's hurt. The Eagles is the only team that I would say that you bring back. The Eagles, see, I was actually ahead of this. 2 weeks ago, I said the Eagles are bad, and you guys need to stop lying to yourselves. And now I got nervous when you crossed them off. Yeah, you're right. The Eagles have been bad for a year and a half now, so I think you're right. Cross them off.
It's like they're just, they're of that group, they've showed very little signs of life.
Yeah, so
All
talented.
right, so you ready for this list? And you can tell me where I'm right or wrong, because there are a
Okay.
couple that have been added to my list of teams that could win the Super Bowl.
Okay.
The obvious ones: Ravens, Bills, Chiefs. Are we in agreement? Those
Yeah.
three are still contenders. We can move on. Texans,
Okay.
we'll have them on there.
Mhm.
Lions.
Yep.
Packers.
I'm shocked that. Oh yeah. That's yeah. We're good.
49ers.
Yep.
Seahawks. So the only two teams that added are the Vikings and the Seahawks. Do you agree with those additions?
I didn't hear you say Vikings, but
Oh, sorry, Vikings and Seahawks.
Yeah, I do agree with those additions. The Seahawks had a lot of injuries. I think that was part of it. But Geno,
Geno's
man,
kind of good. God, I did it again. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah,
Geno's really good.
Geno is playing some of the best football of anybody in the league right now. I think that's enough, man. He was keeping them in that game the other night. And their running attack is returned now, which is super helpful. And the defense, if you remember Mike McDaniel, it took some time for the Ravens defense to come into its own under Mike McDaniel. So I think that maybe you could make the argument that this defense is going to keep getting better. They were great against some bad quarterbacks, but they struggled against the Lions. You can make an argument that they're going to keep getting better. And by the end of the year, that is a championship level team. They got
they're missing
secondary
4
players.
starters on defense last on Monday night against the Lions, which definitely matters.
I like that. The Minnesota, I like that too. Like, I like your list. I want to argue with something, but there's nothing to argue with on your list. Like the questions that are there are questions that, like Sam Darnold is the remaining question for the Vikings, but they have Justin Jefferson, so if you need a clutch play, throw it up over there. You don't got to do nothing special. And they have a good offensive line and a defense that's going to create havoc in the postseason. What else would stop any of the? What's the other team that you added?
The Vikings and the Seahawks are the two additional teams. So the list was Bills, Ravens, Texans, Chiefs, Vikings, Lions, Packers, 49ers, Seahawks.
You got to see. You're really good at producing, but you blew it right here.
Why?
Because you wanted to be right. And you didn't put anything in there for me to argue
I should have put Washington in there.
Yeah, because I actually agree with all that. And I mean, all the teams, the thing that's most interesting about this year is that I do see that I see a very clear path. Like, there's no clear favorite, I guess.
Yeah.
Which lowers, I think, the bar. I think last season, this Seahawks team, I might have felt differently about. But this season, I feel like the bar is a little lower and things will change. Injuries will happen. Teams will play better or worse. Some teams will evolve and adjust and some won't. But there's no team that you mentioned there that I feel like can't. I'd be stunned if they won the Super Bowl.
What is there a team that you think could play themselves in contention? Cowboys,
Nope.
Bengals,
Nope.
New Orleans?
Nope. I guess New Orleans is the closest one because they have talent on defense, and if the right game script, they could put themselves offensively in situations.
3rd in DVOA.
Yeah. Oh, are they already? DVOA is out. Isn't it too soon for DVOA?
It comes out in week 6 when it's actually statistically significant, but
Oh, okay.
they're currently 3rd in DVOA.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not statistically significant yet, but whatever.
I have one significant stat for them.
All right, what's that?
Their quarterback's Derek Carr. They're not winning the Super Bowl.
I mean, yeah, it would fall into the fluke Super Bowl category. Like, there's a couple of fluke Super Bowls that have happened, and Derek Carr winning Super Bowl would fall into the fluke Super Bowl category.
What about the Steelers? Could they play themselves into you trusting them?
I was pretty high on the Steelers last week, and even though they lost, I am higher on them now than I was before this loss, because the thing that is holding the Steelers back is Justin Fields' ceiling. And I wasn't sure if he could raise his ceiling without also having the awful plays. And he did that in last week's game against the Colts. They lost, but we saw a different version of Justin Fields. We saw the playmaker version of Justin Fields, not the system quarterback version. And they needed it, and he showed it. There were some turnovers that weren't his fault that ended that game, I think. But I think, they got 4 wins against the Bengals and the Browns, and they're gonna split. Yeah, they're gonna sweep the Bengals and the Browns. They're gonna split with the Ravens, and they're gonna be in the playoffs.
I mean, they have a
They might lose one to the Browns or one to the Bengals, but they're going at least 3-1 against the Bengals and the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, Fields has definitely made them significantly more interesting. I don't want to just mock Russell Wilson too much, but you got to admit the third string quarterback wearing eye black.
Yeah, eye black is unnecessary. Like, I mean, I guess you have superstitions or you just follow your same process all the time, but like, after the first quarterback gets hurt, then you can apply some eye black. Prior to that, blackless. You're eye blackless.
I mean, just wear a hat if it's that sunny.
Yeah, I mean, the eye black isn't for the sun in that moment. The eye black is for the game, right? So he's only wearing it to prepare to go on the field, which you can swipe that on after the first quarterback gets hurt, especially if you're the third.
Why do they keep pretending that they're going to see how his health progresses to decide who the starting quarterback is? Like, at a certain point, why don't they just be like, all right, yeah, Justin Fields is actually good. He's exceeded our expectations. We're winning football games, and he's like an explosive player.
Yeah, I have no idea. I assume anytime coaches lie, it's about gamesmanship, but none of the teams that they're playing believe that Russell is going to play, right? So they're just doing this to get on our nerves.
Do you think that the Dolphins could give them like a 7th round pick for Russell Wilson?
Yeah, I think that they would be happy to get rid of Russell Wilson.
The Dolphins should do that. He has to be better than Skylar Thompson, and
I'm not sure. So yeah, there's a conversation for not on the podcast. So thank you, Charlie, for another great podcast episode. Thanks to all the great producers. I love you, Pod Bill. We out.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.